I'll never forget the moment the CEO of Memorial General Hospital tore my paycheck in half and threw it on the floor. "Pick it up," he said, his voice dripping with contempt. "Like the dog you are." I was on my knees, tears streaming down my face, when I heard a voice I hadn't heard in 6 months, a voice that made my heart stop, my husband, standing in the doorway, and he had heard everything. Before I tell you what happened next, I need you to do something for me. Hit that subscribe button right now, turn on notifications, because what you're about to hear is a story about cruelty, courage, and the kind of justice that restores your faith in humanity. Trust me, you don't want to miss how this powerful CEO learned the hardest lesson of his life. Now, let me take you back to the beginning. My name is Lisa. I'm 32 years old, and I've been a nurse at Memorial General Hospital for 8 years. 8 long years of double shifts, aching feet, and a paycheck that barely covers rent. But I never complained. Not really. Because nursing isn't just my job, it's my calling. Every morning, I wake up at 4 a.m. in my tiny apartment. The heating doesn't work properly, so I wrap myself in an old blanket and make instant coffee. I gave my breakfast money to my mother last week for her blood pressure medication. That's just how it is sometimes. My husband, Andrew, has been deployed overseas for the past 6 months. He's in the military, a general, though he never made a big deal about his rank. To me, he was just Andrew, the man who held me when I cried, who made me laugh until my stomach hurt, who promised he'd always come home to me. But 6 months is a long time. Some nights, I lie in bed, clutching his photograph, tears soaking my pillow. I'd call his voicemail just to hear his voice on the recording. "Hey, it's Andrew. Leave a message." Sometimes I'd just say, "I miss you, baby." Please come home soon. I never knew if he got those messages. The loneliness was suffocating. But every morning, I dried my tears, put on my scrubs, and went to work. Because my patients needed me, especially the ones in Ward 7, the section of the hospital where we treated patients who couldn't afford proper care. That's where I met Danny. Danny was 7 years old, a beautiful little boy with big brown eyes and a smile that could light up the darkest room. He had leukemia. His mother had died in a car accident 2 years earlier, and his father, a construction worker named Paul, was doing everything humanly possible to save his son. Paul worked 3 jobs. I'd see him arrive at the hospital after midnight, exhausted, his hands covered in calluses and cuts. He'd sit by Danny's bed, holding his small hand, whispering, "You're going to be okay, buddy. Daddy's got you." But the treatments were expensive, impossibly expensive. Paul couldn't keep up with the bills, so I started helping. I paid for Danny's medications out of my own salary. I brought him comic books and action figures. I'd sit with him during my breaks, playing games, reading stories. Danny started calling me Miss Angel. One day, he looked up at me with those innocent eyes and asked, "Miss Lisa, is my daddy sad because of me?" My heart shattered into a million pieces. "No, sweetheart," I whispered, fighting back tears. "Your daddy loves you more than anything in the world. You're his hero. Everything changed 3 weeks ago." That's when Brandon Hayes, our CEO, called an emergency staff meeting. Brandon was everything you'd imagine when you hear the word ruthless executive. 45 years old, designer suits that cost more than my monthly salary, a car worth $200,000. He came from old money, the kind of wealth that makes people believe they're better than everyone else. He'd been CEO for 3 years, and in that time, he'd fired 12 nurses for what he called incompetence. The truth, they'd stood up to him, they'd questioned his decisions, and Brandon Hayes didn't tolerate questions. At the meeting, he stood at the front of the conference room, his expression cold and calculating. "We're losing money on charity cases," he announced. "Ward 7 is a financial drain. We're shutting it down. All patients will be discharged by the end of the month." My blood ran cold. Ward 7 was Danny's ward. I wanted to speak up, to protest, but fear paralyzed me. I'd seen what happened to nurses who challenged Brandon. So I sat there, silent, my hands trembling in my lap. That night, I called Andrew's voicemail again. My voice cracked as I spoke. "Baby, I need you. I don't know how much longer I can do this alone. Everything's falling apart and I miss you so much. Please, if you can hear this, please come home." The next morning, everything exploded. Brandon stormed into Ward 7 with 2 administrators trailing behind him. He pointed directly at Danny's bed. "Why is this child still here?" he demanded. The administrator stammered. "Sir, Nurse Lisa arranged a payment plan with the family." Brandon cut him off. "I didn't authorize charity cases. I want this boy discharged. Today." Paul was there. He'd just finished a night shift and came straight to the hospital. When he heard Brandon's words, he fell to his knees. Literally fell to his knees in front of this man. "Please, sir," Paul begged, his voice breaking. "He's all I have left. His mother is gone. He's my only son. Please don't do this." Brandon looked down at him with disgust. "Not my problem," he said coldly. "Get him out by tonight." Little Danny, pale and weak, looked confused. "Daddy, are we going home? Am I better now?" The hope in his voice destroyed me. Paul couldn't answer. He just held his son and sobbed. I stepped forward. My legs were shaking, but I couldn't stay silent anymore. "Sir, please," I said, my voice trembling. "This child will die without treatment. We took an oath to help people." Brandon spun around, his face twisted with rage. "You took an oath to follow my orders," he shouted. Other nurses backed away, terrified. But I couldn't back down, not this time. "Then I'm begging you," I said, tears forming in my eyes. "As a human being, please don't do this." "Are you deaf?" Brandon roared. "Get this boy out." That's when I did something I never thought I'd have the courage to do. I moved in front of Danny's bed and said, "No." The hallway went completely silent. You could have heard a pin drop. Brandon's face turned bright red. "What did you just say to me?" he asked, his voice dangerously quiet. I was shaking so hard I could barely stand, but I forced the words out. "I said no, sir. I won't let you send him to die." Danny reached out and grabbed my hand. "Miss Lisa, it's okay," he whispered. "I don't want you to get in trouble because of me." This innocent 7-year-old child was trying to protect me. That broke something inside me, but it also made me stronger. Brandon smiled. It was a cold, cruel smile. "You just ended your career," he said. Then he turned and walked away. My office. 2 hours. Those 2 hours felt like an eternity. I stood in the hallway outside Brandon's office, and everyone who passed by looked at me with pity. They knew what was coming. Paul found me there. He had tears streaming down his face. "Thank you," he said. "You're the only one who cared about my son." "I'll never forget what you tried to do." I couldn't respond. I just nodded, trying not to fall apart completely. I pulled out my phone and sent one last text to Andrew's number, knowing he probably wouldn't see it for weeks. "I think I'm about to lose everything. I wish you were here." Then I was called into the office. Brandon had staged it perfectly. His entire administrative staff was there, about 8 people, all sitting around his massive desk. This wasn't just a termination. This was a public execution. "Nurse Lisa," Brandon began, his voice dripping with false formality. "You've been with us for 8 years, correct?" I nodded, not trusting my voice. 8 years of mediocrity, he continued. He opened my personnel file and started reading. Late by 3 minutes on May 7th, used excessive medical supplies on June 12th, spent too much time with patients on July 23rd. These were all petty, meaningless violations. Things he documented just to build a case against me. My eyes filled with tears, but I refused to let them fall. Not yet. Brandon threw my final paycheck onto his desk. "This is your last paycheck," he said. "But honestly, you don't deserve it." Then, while everyone watched, he picked up my paycheck and tore it in half. The sound of that paper ripping echoed in the silent room. He threw the pieces on the floor at my feet. Pick it up, he commanded, like the dog you are. Time seemed to stop. My vision blurred with tears. My hands were shaking, but I knelt down. I actually knelt down on that cold floor and picked up the torn pieces of paper. My tears fell onto them, smudging the ink. Look at you, Brandon said, his voice filled with contempt. Pathetic. You actually thought you mattered. You thought you were important. The people in the room looked away. They were ashamed, but not one of them spoke up. Not one. People like you are nothing, Brandon continued. Nothing. You come from nothing. You'll die as nothing. You're worthless. I couldn't breathe. The words hit me like physical blows. I clutched those torn pieces of paper, and for a moment, I actually believed him. Maybe I was nothing. Maybe I'd been foolish to think I could make a difference. Now get out of my sight, Brandon said. You're fired. I stood up, still holding the torn check. I turned toward the door, my vision blurry with tears. And that's when I heard it. A voice, deep, commanding, familiar. A voice I'd know anywhere. What? Did you just say to her? I froze. My heart stopped. Slowly, I turned around. Standing in the doorway, wearing his military fatigues, was Andrew, my husband. Home. He was actually home. And the look on his face. I'd never seen him look like that before. His eyes were locked on Brandon, and they were filled with a cold, controlled fury. Andrew, I whispered. I could barely get the word out. His expression softened for just a moment when he looked at me. I'm here, baby, he said gently. I'm here. Then his gaze shifted back to Brandon, and the steel returned. Brandon, arrogant as ever, didn't recognize the danger he was in. Who the hell are you? He demanded. This is a private matter. Security. Andrew stepped into the room with the confidence of a man who'd commanded thousands of soldiers in combat. He walked straight to me, gently took the torn paycheck from my shaking hands, and used his thumb to wipe the tears from my cheeks. That simple gesture broke me. I collapsed into his arms, sobbing uncontrollably. 6 months of loneliness, fear and pain poured out of me. Andrew held me tight, one hand cradling the back of my head. I've got you, he whispered into my hair. Nobody will ever hurt you again. Between sobs, I tried to tell him about Danny. They're sending him home. He'll die. I tried to stop them. Andrew's jaw clenched. I know everything, he said quietly. I'm going to fix this. Brandon, growing impatient, raised his voice. I said, who are you? Leave now or I'll have you arrested. Andrew carefully guided me to a chair, making sure I was steady before he turned to face Brandon. When he spoke, his voice was ice cold. You want to arrest me? Really? He removed his military cap. The 3 stars on his uniform gleamed in the office light. I'm General Andrew Sterling, United States Army. And that woman you just destroyed, she's my wife. The color drained from Brandon's face. One of the administrators gasped. General, Sterling, she whispered. Brandon's eyes went wide. Sterling? Wait. The administrator, her voice shaking, addressed Brandon. Sir, General Sterling is on the National Hospital Board of Directors. His family foundation donated $75 million to this hospital. Brandon stumbled backward, gripping his desk for support. Andrew pulled out his phone. I've been standing outside that door for 10 minutes, he said calmly. I recorded everything. He pressed play. Brandon's voice filled the room. Pick it up. Like the dog you are. Then, you're nothing. Nothing. The administrators looked horrified. Andrew's voice remained calm, but I could hear the emotion underneath. You made my wife kneel. You called her worthless. Do you know what she's been doing? She works 16-hour shifts. She saves lives every single day. She's been paying for a dying child's medical treatments out of her own pocket because she has a heart. Something you clearly lack. Andrew made one phone call. Within 5 minutes, the hospital boardroom was filled with board members, lawyers, and the hospital chairman. Brandon tried to defend himself, but there was no defense. Andrew presented everything. Brandon's excessive spending on luxury items while cutting nurse salaries, his pattern of harassment and abuse, his denial of life-saving treatment to patients who couldn't pay. The evidence was overwhelming. The chairman stood up. "Mr. Hayes, you are terminated effective immediately." Brandon's face went white. "You can't do this. My family—" The chairman cut him off. "Your family doesn't own this hospital. The Sterling Foundation does." Security entered the room. Brandon looked at Andrew, his arrogance finally crumbling. "Please, I didn't know—" Andrew's expression didn't change. "You didn't need to know who she was married to," he said quietly. "You just needed to be a decent human being. You failed." Brandon was escorted out the same way he'd humiliated so many others. No one felt sorry for him. The chairman turned to me. "Mrs. Sterling, on behalf of this hospital, I apologize. We're establishing the Lisa Sterling Medical Fund today. Full funding for all charity cases, starting with Danny. I couldn't hold it together anymore." I broke down crying again, but this time they were tears of relief and joy. Andrew and I went to Ward 7 together. When Danny saw us, his face lit up. "Miss Angel, you're back, and you brought a soldier." Andrew knelt beside Danny's bed, his eyes soft. "Hi, Danny. I'm Andrew. I'm a general in the army. And you know what generals do?" Danny's eyes went wide. "What?" Andrew smiled. "We protect people, and I'm going to make sure you get better. That's a promise." Danny tried to salute, though his arm was weak. Andrew saluted back, and I saw tears in my husband's eyes. Paul fell to his knees beside the bed, thanking us over and over. "God bless you both. God bless you." That evening, Andrew and I finally had a moment alone. "Why didn't you tell me?" I asked. "About the board, the foundation, all of it." Andrew took my hands in his. "When we met, I was just a soldier," he said. "You fell in love with that man. I didn't want my family's wealth to change us. I wanted you to live freely, to be yourself." I shook my head, tears streaming down my face again. I thought I was alone. Struggling alone. His voice broke. "You were never alone. I had people watching over you. I knew about every double shift, every meal you skipped, every penny you gave to patients. That's why I love you. You're the richest person I know." We held each other and cried. After all those months apart, after all that pain, we were finally together again. 6 months have passed since that day. Danny's cancer is in remission. He's going to live. He's back in school now, playing soccer, being a normal 7-year-old kid. Brandon Hayes, last I heard, no hospital will hire him. His reputation is destroyed. And honestly, I don't think about him anymore. But I think about that day every single day. I learned something important. Your worth isn't determined by your paycheck. It's not determined by how others treat you or what they say about you. I was never nothing. I was always enough. And if you're going through something similar right now, if someone is making you feel small, worthless, or invisible, please hear me. Hold on. Stand up for what's right, even when you're terrified. Justice might be closer than you think. And you are not nothing. You are everything. If this story moved you, if it gave you hope or made you cry, please hit that like button. Subscribe to this channel because I share real stories of justice, karma, and the power of standing up for what's right. Comment below and tell me, have you ever been humiliated at work? Have you ever stood up for what's right even when you were scared? Your story matters. Share this video with someone who needs to hear this message today. Someone who feels broken or worthless. Remind them that they matter. I'll see you in the next story. Until then, stay strong, stay kind, and never let anyone dim your light.